I'm Rev Risty, Head Rebel at REBL Marketing, and I'm here today with Richard Marks with RDM Management Group, and we're going to talk a little bit about his coaching business and what he's been doing through the pandemic and what he's also doing for marketing. Hey, Richard, how are you?
I am great, Reb. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. It's a sunny day in San Diego, of course.
Yes, it is. Always sunny in San Diego. It's great
Always sunny.
talking to you this morning.
So, Richard, if you could, just for my audience, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Of course, again, my name is Richard Marks. My company is RDM Management Group. Our company mantra is expect great things to happen. And that ties into what we do. We really are about positively impacting lives, one interaction, one training, one coaching session at a time, and through professional development courses. We work with a lot of leaders. We work with a lot of folks in the workplace that might be struggling in the form of communication skills, strategic thinking. Emotional intelligence is one of those huge topics as well. And we really walk them through the blueprint in terms of giving them some structure, some discipline, some proven methodologies that work, and apply them in that sort of that personal application. And then by doing so, that sort of increased their confidence with the ability to speak up, to share their thoughts, share their views, share their perspectives. And more importantly, the outcome of that is always successful, not only for them, but perhaps their cohorts, their peers, and more importantly, their direct reports.
That's great. Obviously, we're just in this crazy times. What are you finding that people are coming to you or asking questions about the most?
A couple of them, of course, just as an example, we're conducting this interview virtually. So a lot of folks that are presenters, speakers, instructors, sometimes they struggle with that to communicate virtually because they're not actively or engaged, more importantly, face-to-face with their audience. And that creates some level of disconnect because they can't feel or touch them or have that conversation with them. And so we, again, help provide that level of confidence and strategy to build that confidence for the outcome of their business. Another one is diversity and inclusion, unconscious bias. That is becoming really important right now. That's on a lot of folks' mind, given the current state of our country. But also, maybe it's the political landscape or the media, I'm not sure. But there seems to be, at least from some perspective, there's a lot of challenges with collaboration, working together, partnering for a better outcome. There seems to be a lot of division. So we create strategies, proven strategies on strategic conversations, helping people develop their communication skills, and more importantly, their listening skills, listening to understand and not listening to reply. So those are the majority of the topics, at least in this current time since the pandemic. It's, again, some leadership development, a lot of communication skills, and race relation, I guess, we have to put it in a category. Those are the topics that seem to be very relevant today.
Okay. So what are your top one or two tips on being better at communicating? So you mentioned listening. How do I be a better listener?
Right. So I think it was Stephen Covey who says is that most people listen to reply versus listening to understand. And I would even like to take that up a notch. I'm going to refer to it as active listening. I think it's important for me to ask some probing questions to get a level of understanding and to listen objectively, again, without depositing my views or my perspective initially. I really want to listen. So listening to understand is crucial. As I listen to understand your views, your perspective, then I'm able to orderly. It doesn't have to be a tit for tat. It doesn't have to be my views is better than your views. I think we all have a view. We all have a perspective, but I think we should respect each other differently. Almost what diversity and inclusion is, which is simply respecting each other's differences, but I also believe that we can equally do that with just simply listening to understand and respecting each other's differences. We do not have to agree, but more importantly, I should respect your view and you should be able to respect mine.
Yeah, it's the good and the bad of what's happening right now. I think it's brought some really great things to light that people talked about a little bit in the past, but now we've really been forced to face it head on. With diversity and inclusion, what do you feel, or what are you hearing from people is their biggest challenge? Is it they just don't realize that they're doing something, or that there is a problem, or they understand there's a problem, they just don't know how to deal with it?
I think all of those things, but I think one of the things that all parties can eventually do, and is actually this from a topic that we facilitate, which is emotional intelligence. And there's a category in emotional intelligence that talks about social awareness. And in the awareness category, it's simply the ability to do empathy. Again, we could have our views, have our perspectives, but if I can't show empathy for the way that you feel, that's going to create a negative reaction. Right? If I can't show empathy to you, that means that, hey, if I can't display empathy in your views or your perspective, chances are is that is going to continue to encourage the person to act out to get some level of attention. And we see that in protesting, again, as an example. Yeah. Empathy is not being displayed from different views or different perspectives. And so it's like, hey, I want you to hear me. I want you to feel my pain, my issues that I'm going through. And if that is completely ignored, that creates a challenge and the disconnect. So I think all parties could do just one simple thing, display empathy. That's number one. Number two, again, going back to listening, again, just listening. And also, we also don't always have to be offended. So if race relations is a very difficult conversation, and we should be able to have that dialogue, it is simply just a conversation. But there's so much sensitivity around it, and other folks that's really seeking to understand the differences on how we feel or think, they should be able to share their view, share their perspective, and not feel as though they're walking on a landmine. And equally, the person on the receiving end doesn't have to be offended. Being offended is a choice. So if I come from a place of curiosity, I want to learn, I want to grow, and I can display some empathy, chances are that's a blueprint for a great dialogue and a great conversation. It creates opportunity for learning and growing for both parties.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Curiosity, it really is the best way to approach things, is from a position of, I want to learn, I want to communicate. As a business owner, how do I start that dialogue with my team? How do I open it up? You know, what's the first step that a business owner should take?
Well, I think is to really get to know their employees as individuals. Right. Some leaders that I interact with, they say, hey, well, Richard, you know, we don't have an issue on diversity or race in our organization. No. I'm like, well, how do you know? Well, no one's complaining. Well, that's not always a telltale, because we have this concept that's referred to as microaggression. And so sometimes people that's on the receiving end of microaggression, they feel as though if they say something, if they communicate their views, their perspective, or how they feel, they may be called out, they may be discriminated against, they may some form of retaliation. So they don't say anything. And so that also creates what we call emotional tax, this emotional weight that people a mental weight that people carry around, just trying to get through the day. So I would encourage leaders to build those one-on-one conversations with their direct reports, get to know them personally. Now, and that's interesting perspective, because way of leading, as an example, was leading with the mind and not the heart. You know, just stick to the facts, be very strategic, and stick to the business. The interesting concept about that is that we're all human beings. We all have feelings. We all want to be with value, respect, and dignity. And so I should be able to balance that, meaning that I should be able to care about you as an individual. I should be able to build a relationship with you as an individual. Still keep it professional, but I get to know you, who your family members are, what you like, what you like. As I get to know you as an individual, it's a comfortable place where we can have dialogue and conversation. It's not a us or against them. And so that's one of the most important things I would encourage leaders to do, is get to know their as individuals. Do that, you build continuity, you learn about each other, you see things maybe the same, maybe even somewhat differently, but you're building that collaboration. And it's so much easier to have dialogue and conversation with people that you know versus people that you don't know and you're just trying to figure it out. And this is something that I learned from a lady by the name of Annette. She was the president of a company that I used to work with, the Western region. And I consider myself as a pretty intuitive leader. I was being able to build really collaborative teams, and we executed on getting the job done. But Annette, who was responsible for thousands of people versus me, just 100 plus, she knew all of my folks. She knew their birthdays. She knew in some cases more about my people than I did. And I thought, I felt embarrassed. Like, how can this president know more about my people than I do? And so that was an opportunity for me to get to know my people, spending time, quality time in the one-on-ones, developing relationships, going to lunch, having a coffee. Virtually now, you can do that.
Right.
And as you build a relationship, you'll be amazed on what you can accomplish.
Yeah, that's great. And that's amazing, because I was thinking in my head, I have a small team, but what do you do when your team's 100, 1,000? Like, how do you really get to know people? But I'm assuming probably part of that process is making sure that those that are in the leadership positions, that they're doing that and it's trickling down into the organization.
Yeah, and that's so important. I like that trickle down, because leaders are setting the example for others to follow, to include others. And this is how we learn in leadership. It's our organic growth. Some leaders have no idea how to, again, what I'm saying, what got them there from individual contributor to leader is not the same thing that allows them to thrive as a leader. And so I call it transition from the hard skill, more about what you know, to the soft skills, to more about how you and I act. And that's a skill set. And soft skills are just as important as hard skills. You can't abandon one for the other. It's about balance.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. We always think at REBL, it's, what makes you different, like anybody else. Do you want to work with us? Do you want to work with the people that you're in an office with 8 hours a day? Do you like them? So I love that. I think that's great advice. Get to know your people. I know as a business owner, sometimes you just get so tied up and wound up in everything that's going on, and you're being pulled in 100 different directions, and it's easy to kind of forget that there's a whole team behind you and that they're important and they need their time with you.
Well, leaders get things done. I mean, we may be ultimately responsible for the task, the goal, and the objectives, but we're not the one that's doing it. Our people are doing it. And so we get things done through other people. I think it's important and crucial to be able to do that, building that relationship, building that continuity, and continue to thrive in that particular area.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. You and I have met through some networking groups. And, I think that's a core of how we build business as small businesses and professional services. And of course, that all went to a dead stop, earlier this year. And now we're back online. And what I love that you've done is you've created this strategic alliance network of professionals to bring us together to really leverage our networks and the power of bringing people like-minded together to help educate other business owners, other professionals. Tell me a little bit about what started that idea for the Strategic Alliance, and what's the goal or the vision that you have?
Well, how it started was really out of a failed or missed opportunity on my part. There's a medical device company here in San Diego. I had a great opportunity to bid for their business. And one of the reasons I did not win the opportunity is because I wasn't speaking as this HR director. That was a miscommunication. And I knew that. It was focusing on assessments. And this particular organization wanted to deploy assessment to their sales team because they had this atrocious attrition rate. And they wanted to use assessments as a way to better identify the top salespeople for their organization. So long story short, I missed this great opportunity early in my business. And again, I realized that because I was missing part of the skill set I needed to be able to speak the language to these HR professionals. So that's really how it started. My very first strategic partner, before they were called strategic partners, was a way to fill a void, a gap that was in my business. And as I continued to grow as a company, I realized there were several gaps that I needed to fill. And so Instead of trying to fill those gaps and learn them, and trying to be everything to everyone, I began to identify talented people with that particular skill. And then likewise, I filled the void for them. In many of their businesses, they had a gap in sales. My background, 30 plus years in sales and sales leadership. So I was helping them sell and promote their product, and they were helping me fill some of these gaps. Mm-hmm. And so we toyed with, these relationships, for a few years, 2 or 3 years. Then all of a sudden COVID hit. And coming from my sales background, Reb, I learned that when things happen in your business, one of the things that you can do is continue to stay in contact with your customer base, your prospect base. Do what you can, and don't necessarily worry about what you can't do. So I focus on what we could do, and what I could do as a business owner was have these webinars. So there came the birth of the Managing Through Crisis series, and we were going and provided strategic conversations, topics, and dialogue to help leaders manage through their crisis while they were dealing with this pandemic. And the crisis was managing remotely, communicating virtually, conflict resolution, those type of topics. And as I looked into my database of talented folks that I was connected with, I realized they also had topics that could also help our audience manage through a crisis. And that's how it came together. In all transparency, all of our businesses were impacted negatively initially by the pandemic because we were all doing face-to-face trainings. We're all traveling around the country, training and coaching folks, and that came to a screeching halt. To do all of this virtually. And as we began to collaborate and put these webinars together, we realized that we were actually putting together topics and strategies that will really help folks. And there were also many versions of the trainings that we did around the country before the pandemic hit. And so we realized that this is a great business opportunity to really collaborate and offer virtual instructor-led trainings. Unlike the webinars, they were complimentary. The webinar trainings, they were for a fee. We began to financially revitalize our businesses by offering this very important content to our virtual audience. And I began to get introduced to other alliance partners like yourself. We wanted to help folks with marketing and branding. We knew that that was a gap for a lot of businesses who were accustomed to meeting for coffee and having these marketing plans and discussions. Well, you couldn't do that in the pandemic, but you could do it virtually. And so that's one of the things that you brought to our organization that really helped us from a brand and marketing perspective, not only for our audience, but even for my business as well. And it continues.
Yeah, no, I love it. And this group you brought together is just some of the most amazing people. They really are. And I think too, you and I are sales and marketing people, but a lot of them are just really PhDs or professionals are just amazing, but they're not sales and marketing. So I do like to think we're kind of helping them learn a little bit about that as well. So
you're absolutely correct. They're educators, they're instructors, they're professors, they're clinical psychologists. That's great. A song by an organization, or I think the song was back in the 90s by a band, please forgive me, called Naughty by Nature. And it was like OPP. And so I've changed that OPP to only positive people for my group, right? So that's why I believe surrounding my positive people. And these people that I have the opportunity, Reb, to interact with on a regular basis, to work with, to be mentored by, and sometimes coach and develop as well, it has really just leveraged and strengthened my knowledge, my business, and ways that you can pay for this education. And so collaboratively, we are hard to compete against. We have a very strong team. The Strategic Alliance Network is a phenomenal group, and we cover, get this, about different topics. And that's very compelling. And they're strong, and they're talented, and they're gifted. And more importantly, they love people. They want to help. And they have that servant leadership. heart, mind, and perspective. And that makes all the difference for me. We care about helping others help themselves.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. I love the group. I'm so proud, really, to be a part of it. If I can ask you to leave my audience with one thing, one bit of advice as we go into the end of the year, what would that be? It could be sales, marketing, communication.
Okay. Well, I would say remain focused, remain disciplined, and don't abandon your gifts, your talents. The pandemic has thrown us in for a tailspin in a variety of different ways. But like my company and many others, we have sort of figured a way out how to continue to not only survive, but even thrive. And sometimes the difference between success and failure is just simply not giving up. And so I would encourage all of the audience, no matter where you are, no matter what may you be experiencing, no matter the negative thoughts and the feelings and emotions that connected to that, I believe those are distractions. And if you focus on those distractions, tell you from your growth, your development, more importantly, your desired outcome. Our mantra is expect great things to happen. We just don't say that, we believe that, and it's tied to the core of who we are. And then finally, positively impacting lives at a time. That's an opportunity for our company, our country right now. Our country is, I think, is literally crying for connection. It's bad enough that the pandemic has really, stripped us from our families, that close-knit connection, and to add the political ideology, the media even created a further divide. We're that as people. We're better than that as Americans. And I want the audience to take a moment, talk to someone that's outside of your core group, build a relationship, curious, respect your differences, but more importantly, collaborate. There's nothing that we can't do together. And so I'm just an optimist by heart. I really care about people, and that's what our organization is about. We really want to help people to help themselves, Brad.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much, Richard. If someone would like to get a hold of you, what would be the best way to do that?
2 ways. My telephone number, 619-408-8567. Our website is rdmmanagementgroup.com. Email address is richard@rdmmanagementgroup.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, I've really enjoyed this. I love working with you, and thank you so much again for your time.
And thank you, Rep, for your contribution. You're an awesome person, as you already know. As a matter of fact, as one of my friends often share with me, awesome human. Thank you for being such an awesome human. We really appreciate you.